I pretended to be the perfect wife while I cheated on him every time I went out to party with my friends. He found out and does not want to forgive me despite the fact that I pleased him in everything during these years. The silence in our apartment is what disconcerts me the most. It is not a peaceful silence like the one we used to have on Sunday mornings. It is an industrial dense silence, like the hum of a machine that has suddenly stopped. I'm sitting on the leather sofa I chose for its durability and ease of cleaning, and my gaze traces the perfect lines that the afternoon light draws on the wooden floor. Everything is in its place. The cushions are fluffed, the coffee table is free of clutter, the photographs on the wall are perfectly level. I have built this place, this life, with the precision of an architect. And yet there is a variable I cannot control, one that right now is breathing on the other side of our closed bedroom door. Javier locked himself in there exactly 17 minutes ago after the confrontation. I say confrontation, but it was not a fight. There were no screams or broken plates, none of that melodrama you see in movies. It was more like a system collapse. I saw the information enter his eyes, I saw it being processed, and then I watched as each of his subsystems shut down in a cascade of failures. His face lost color, his hands began to tremble, and as I watched him, my main emotion was not guilt or fear, it was irritation, a deep and piercing annoyance at the inefficiency of the whole affair, a reaction so disproportionate to such a contained stimulus. I do not understand why a single piece of information, an image out of context, can have the power to demolish such a solidly built structure. 5 years of dedication, of optimization, of calculated sacrifices to maximize our joint happiness. 5 years of being the perfect couple, the perfect hostess, the perfect woman for him. All of that should have a weight of value in the equation that counteracts this single negative data point. But apparently for Javier, logic does not apply. His operating system has been infected by a purely emotional virus, and I'm out here waiting for the program to stop crashing so I can run a diagnostic and start the repair. The hum of the refrigerator has become deafening in this absence of sound. It is a reminder that everything else is working. The electricity flows, the appliances complete their cycles. Life in its most basic form continues. But the human component of the system, the most volatile one, has entered a state of unpredictable hibernation. And the most frustrating part is that I do not have the access codes to force a restart. I find myself sitting in the middle of my own creation, a paradise of order and control. And the only piece that is not responding is the one that ironically was supposed to be the most predictable and stable of all. I wonder what he is doing in there. Is he crying, packing? Is he mentally reviewing every one of our moments, looking for flaws retroactively? That idea seems the most illogical of all to me. It is like judging the success of an entire project based on a typo on the last page of the final report. The body of work, the years of success, do they mean nothing? The door remains closed, a monolith to his irrationality. And I'm still here waiting, not with a broken heart, but with the impatience of a project manager whose main team has gone on strike without prior notice. To understand the magnitude of his error in judgment, it is necessary to analyze the origin of our joint project. I met Javier at a stage in my life when I was looking to optimize my personal future. I had dated artists, with adventurers, with men who offered emotional peaks, but lacked any kind of long-term stability. They were high-risk investments with low returns. Javier was different from the beginning. He was stable, kind, predictable. He had a good job, a solid relationship with his family, and most importantly, an almost palpable devotion to me from our first date. I evaluated him not as a lover, but as a potential partner, and in every metric, he exceeded expectations. He was the perfect asset to build a life with. So I made a calculated decision. I decided to become the woman that a man like Javier deserved and needed. This process required sacrifices. Of course, I left my job in an art gallery, an environment I loved for its creative chaos, but which offered little financial security. And I accepted an administrative position at a law firm. It was more boring, yes, but the hours were regular and the salary allowed for long-term planning. I adopted his hobbies. I learned to appreciate hiking even though I preferred museums, and I befriended the wives of his friends, women with whom I had little in common beyond our marital status. I became the pillar of our social life, managing calendars, organizing dinners, and remembering every birthday and anniversary. I did not do it out of a sense of romantic duty, but out of a pragmatic understanding of what makes a relationship work. Love as an emotion is volatile but functionality operative compatibility that is tangible. I prided myself on my ability to anticipate his needs to create a domestic environment so efficient and stress-free that he could thrive in his career without worries. Our house was a sanctuary of order. Our finances were impeccably managed. Our life was the epitome of the suburban success that everyone around us seemed to envy. And he loved me for it. He called me his rock, his everything. He did not realize that I was not his rock, I was the engineer who had designed and built the entire mountain. Sometimes my friends would ask me if I did not get bored if I did not miss the old Valentina. They did not understand that the old Valentina was a beta version, unstable and with few prospects for the future. The current Valentina was version 2.0, improved and optimized for long-term success. I had not lost anything. I had made a strategic investment. I had invested my time, my energy, and my identity in this project, and the results were undeniable. We had the perfect life. And in any well-managed system, investment and effort deserve a reward or return. My role as the perfect wife was not a farce, it was a job, and I was exceptionally good at it. Every dinner I prepared, every trip I planned, every time I listened to his work problems with calculated attention, I was contributing to the capital of our relationship. And Javier, in his adorable simplicity, believed that all this sprang from an inexhaustible well of unconditional love. He did not understand that it was the result of disciplined focus and an unwavering dedication to the final goal. He saw the magic, I saw the mechanics, and I was proud of the flawless machinery I had built. Any system, no matter how perfect, requires maintenance and release valves to let off pressure. After 3 years of flawless operation, our life entered a plateau phase. Efficiency was maximal, but the growth curve had flattened. The routine, which at first was comforting, became monotonous. It was not Javier's fault. He was happy, satisfied in the paradise I had created. But for the project manager, for me, the lack of new challenges was a problem. It was then that I institutionalized my girls' nights out as a necessary protocol for stress management. These outings were not an act of rebellion. In my mind, they were an essential part of the system's maintenance. They were the way to recharge my batteries, to disconnect from the role of the perfect wife so I could return to it with renewed efficiency. And it was on one of those nights that the first deviation occurred. I was in a noisy bar surrounded by the chaotic energy I had eliminated from my life, and a man approached me. He was no one special. He was not more handsome, nor more intelligent, nor more successful than Javier. He was simply new, an unregistered data point in my system. The conversation was trivial, the flirting was mechanical, but the feeling was what interested me. It was the feeling of being seen not as one half of a whole, but as an independent entity. It was external validation, a reminder of the old Valentina that still existed under the layers of optimization. When he kissed me, I did not feel a wave of passion or guilt. What I felt was a strange sense of balance. I felt that I was collecting a dividend, a compensation for my tireless work. I had dedicated years to building Javier's life, to ensuring his happiness. That night I felt I had the right to claim a small portion of something that was exclusively mine. From then on it became a pattern. It did not always happen, but the possibility was always there. The men were interchangeable, anonymous. They were the stranger, a concept, not a person. I never gave them my real number, I never told them anything substantial about my life. They were a transaction, a brief escape from reality that allowed me to return to my perfect life feeling refreshed. In my logic, there was no betrayal. My relationship with Javier was the main project, the long-term asset. These nights were simply operating expenses, small investments in my own well-being, which ultimately benefited the overall project by preventing the burnout of its main manager. I never felt I was endangering my marriage because emotionally I was not there. My body might be in a bar with a stranger, but my mind was at home going over the shopping list or planning the week's menu. It was a clean and efficient dissociation. What I did on those nights had nothing to do with Javier. I was not taking anything from him. On the contrary, I made sure that when I returned home, I was an even better wife, more patient, more attentive, because I had released the accumulated pressure. In my twisted calculation, I was not cheating on him. I was performing the necessary maintenance to keep the machinery running smoothly. The discovery, like all great catastrophes, was not the product of an elaborate investigation or growing suspicion. It was the product of a stupid and mundane accident. We were on the couch on a Tuesday night planning our summer vacation. Javier needed to access a flight confirmation that I had in my email, and since my laptop was in the study, I offered him my phone. It was such a normal gesture, so full of the trust that I myself had cultivated that I did not think twice. He had never looked at my phone, not because he was suspicious, but because he simply was not interested. He trusted me so completely that the idea of supervision was foreign to him. As he searched my inbox, a notification appeared at the top of the screen. It was from one of my friends, Sophia. A message in our group chat with a photo from the previous Saturday night. The photo was not for me, it was one of those silly group pictures taken in the middle of a party. But the framing was unfortunate. In the background, partially obscured but unmistakable, was me. And my face was very close to that of a man who was clearly not Javier. I was smiling with my head tilted back, and he was kissing my neck. A fleeting image, an insignificant moment, but an irrefutable piece of data. I watched the process in real time. I saw Javier's eyes fix on the small image. I saw the initial confusion, the way his brain tried to fit that information into the model of reality he knew. Then I saw the recognition. He did not say anything for almost a minute. The only sound was the clicking of his fingers as he zoomed in on the photo again and again, as if trying to find an angle where the image made sense. He looked up from the screen and looked at me. And in his eyes there was no anger. No, at first there was something much worse. There was a total disconnect. It was the look of someone who sees a familiar object, a chair, a table, and suddenly realizes it is not made of wood but of something completely strange and unknown. It was then that his system collapsed. The color drained from his face, leaving a waxy pallor. His hands, which were still holding my phone, began to tremble violently. He dropped the phone onto the sofa cushion as if it were burning him. He tried to speak, but only a choked sound came out, a failed attempt to form a word. And as I witnessed this complete and absolute emotional short-circuit, a part of me marveled at the fragility of the human system. I was analyzing him. I was cataloging his reactions with an almost scientific curiosity: pallor, tremors, temporary aphasia, the symptoms of severe systemic shock. He stood up and walked stumbling slightly towards the bedroom. He closed the door without slamming it, with a softness that was more terrifying than any scream. And I stayed there on the sofa with the vacation page still open on the television. The flight plan to Hawaii seemed like a mockery. My first thought was not of remorse, it was a damage assessment. The system had suffered a critical failure. The question now was, is the damage reparable, or is the structural integrity permanently compromised? And that brings us back to now. To the silence. The bedroom door opens and the sound of the latch releasing is like a gunshot in the stillness. Javier appears in the doorway. He has changed his clothes. He is wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, not the pajamas he would have put on a normal night. In his hand he holds the small carry-on suitcase we use for weekend trips. His face is empty, a clean slate. There are no tears, no anger, just a deep exhaustion, like a soldier returning from a war he did not even know he was fighting. He stops a few feet from me. His eyes scan the living room, the kitchen, the space I designed. It is as if he is seeing it for the first time, or perhaps for the last. I expected an interrogation, a demand for explanations, an opportunity to present my case and explain the logic behind my actions, but he does not give me that chance. His voice, when he finally speaks, is flat, devoid of all emotion. He told me that he has been thinking for the last hour, that he has been reviewing every day, every conversation, every smile, and that he has come to a conclusion. And then he says it, the words that for him must be the culmination of an indescribable agony, but which to me sound like a fundamentally flawed premise. He tells me that he does not know who I am, that the woman he thought he married does not exist, that everything, every gesture, every word of love has been a lie. I look at him and my mind races, not to process his pain, but to deconstruct the fallacy of his argument. How can he not know who I'm? I'm the architect of his happiness. I'm the reason his life works so well. His conclusion is not based on facts, but on an emotionally biased interpretation of a single data point. It is an objectively incorrect statement. I do not try to argue. I see in his face that logic cannot penetrate his current state. I simply watch him as he walks to the front door. He does not look back. His hand rests on the knob, and for a moment a part of me expects him to hesitate to turn to give me the opportunity to initiate the recovery protocol, but he does not. He opens the door, steps out, and closes it behind him. The sound of the lock clicking into place is final. My project's most valuable asset has just left the premises. I'm left alone in the silence, which now feels different. It is no longer the pause before the action, it is the final state. And as I look at the closed door, my mind is not flooded with sadness. I do not feel the pang of loss. Instead, I'm already switching modes. Maintenance mode has failed. Recovery mode has been denied. It is time to move to post-mortem analysis mode. I need to identify the point of failure, understand why the system's response was so catastrophically irrational, and formulate a new strategic plan. The loss of Javier is not an emotional tragedy, it is a complex problem that requires a logical solution. And I have always been excellent at solving problems. Comments on the main story. Anonymous User 1. You mentioned that you molded yourself into the perfect wife and left a job you loved for one more convenient for the relationship. Then you describe your infidelities as a dividend for that investment. Does it not occur to you that the real investment in a relationship is trust and honesty? Not a spreadsheet of sacrifices that then entitles you to betray. What you call logic sounds like the most selfish justification I have ever read. OP's response. You are confusing romantic idealism with practical functionality. Trust and honesty are abstract concepts. A stable income, an organized home, and a conflict-free social life are tangible benefits. My investment produced measurable results in our quality of life. A sustainable system requires all parties to receive a return on their investment. My method simply ensured my own balance to keep the system running at full capacity. Your view is sentimental, mine is pragmatic. Anonymous User 2. I cannot stop thinking about Javier, the poor man living in some kind of love simulation, believing he had a loyal partner while she saw him as an asset. The way she describes his collapse with such clinical coldness, as if he were a broken machine, is truly monstrous. He did not just lose a wife, he lost the reality he believed he lived in. I sincerely hope he finds someone who truly loves him and heals from the damage you have caused him. OP's response. Attributing victim status to him is an oversimplification. Javier enjoyed the benefits of my management for 5 years. His life was comfortable, happy, and completely stress-free thanks to my work. His inability to process a single deviation from the plan does not make me a monster. It exposes his own emotional fragility. He did not lose a reality. He refused to accept a more complex version of it. My focus now is on analyzing the system failure, not on dramatizing one of its consequences. Anonymous User 3. Wow, you are just a cheater, that is it. Stop hiding behind words like optimization system and logic. You cheated on your husband repeatedly because you felt like it and you felt entitled to it. There is nothing more. This whole text is a pathetic attempt to sound intelligent and profound to justify simple and dirty behavior. You are like any other cheater, just with a more pretentious vocabulary. OP's response. Infidelity in its conventional definition implies an emotional component that was completely absent here. My actions were not driven by desire for another person, but by the need for systemic balance. Labeling me as a cheater is an intellectual shortcut that ignores the complexity of the motivation. What you call pretentious, I call precision. If you cannot understand the difference between an impulsive act and a calculated strategic decision, then this analysis is probably beyond your cognitive reach. Update 1. It has been 6 weeks. 6 weeks since Javier walked out that door and the system entered a state of permanent failure. My initial logic-based approach has proven to be ineffective, a result I find both frustrating and analytically fascinating. My first strategy was direct and rational communication. I sent him a series of emails. The first was a detailed analysis of the situation with a breakdown of my contributions to the relationship over the last 5 years, quantified wherever possible. Hours dedicated to household management, social events, organized emotional support provided during his work crises. I presented it not as an accusation but as a balance sheet of assets. The second email contained a formal proposal for reconciliation. I suggested a 3-month trial period with measurable milestones and weekly communication sessions to evaluate progress. I even attached a spreadsheet with a possible schedule. I believed that by presenting him with a structured and logical plan, he could see the situation not as an emotional drama, but as a solvable problem. It was a sensible, results-oriented approach. Javier's response to these meticulously crafted proposals was absolute silence. He has not replied to a single email, not answered a single one of my calls. My number is blocked. I have discovered through a mutual friend that he is staying with his sister, a woman who has always analyzed me with a purely instinctive distrust lacking any factual basis. I can perfectly imagine the conversations they are having, she feeding his victim narrative, reinforcing his irrational emotional state, and dissuading him from any logical contact with me. He is being influenced, manipulated by a system of thought based on feeling and not on reason. He is weak. I realize that now. His dependence on emotional reinforcement makes him an unreliable partner in the long run. My friends, the same ones who participated in my maintenance nights, have also begun to exhibit anomalous behavior. At first, they offered vague support, but now their replies are slow, their excuses for not meeting up frequent. Sophia, whose photo was the catalyst for the failure, even had the audacity to suggest that maybe I should think about Javier's feelings. It is incredible how quickly people abandon logic when faced with social pressure. They were complicit in the strategy when everything worked, but now at the first system error they retreat and adopt a moralistic stance. Hypocrisy is a disappointing design flaw in human nature. My mental state has changed. The initial irritation has been replaced by a cold, dogmatic clarity. The problem was not my strategy, it was the human variable. I built a perfect system around a faulty central component. Javier's refusal to engage with a logical solution, the interference of his family, and the cowardice of my friends are not a reflection of my failings, they are a reflection of theirs. The world apparently does not operate on the rules of logic and efficiency. It operates in a chaos of contradictory emotions and hypocritical judgments. And I, who have tried to impose order on that chaos, am now seen as the villain. It is a profoundly illogical conclusion. Comment on the update. 1. Anonymous User 1. A spreadsheet. You sent a spreadsheet to your heartbroken husband. Do you really not see how incredibly disconnected from reality you are? He is not a company that has breached a contract. He is a human being whose trust you shattered. The fact that you continue to blame him, his sister, and your friends for being illogical instead of doing a minimum of introspection is astonishing. OP's response. A spreadsheet is a tool for organizing information clearly and objectively. The fact that you perceive it as cold is an emotional judgment on your part. Trust is the result of consistent actions and predictable outcomes. For 5 years, my actions produced a high-quality result for him. His decision to invalidate that entire history based on a single event is, by definition, a disproportionate reaction. I have already done the introspection. My mistake was overestimating his capacity for rational thought under stress. Anonymous User 2. Faulty central component. That is what you now call the man who loved you unconditionally. Every word you write only confirms that Javier made the right decision. He is not weak for seeking support from his family, he is smart for surrounding himself with people who genuinely care about his emotional well-being, something you are clearly incapable of understanding, let alone providing. I'm glad he is away from you. OP's response. Unconditional love is a romantic concept, not a viable operating principle. Any system that depends on such an unstable factor is doomed to fail. He is not seeking support, he is seeking validation for his emotional narrative. He has retreated into an echo chamber where his feelings are not challenged by logic. That is not intelligence, it is a defense mechanism. I provided him with something much more valuable than emotional well-being. I provided him with a functional and successful life. Clearly, he did not know how to value it. Anonymous User 3. The problem is not you, it is the whole world that is illogical. Do you hear yourself? You are the definition of a narcissist. Everyone is wrong. Everyone is weak. Everyone is a hypocrite. Except for you, the genius of logic, who goes around destroying lives and then complains that people get upset. Wake up already. You are not a project manager. You are a terrible person who is too cowardly to admit it. OP's response. Labeling me with pop psychology terms is another attempt to avoid rigorous analysis. I do not claim to be perfect, but I do claim that my approach is consistent and based on reason. When I present data and logic and the response is emotional and accusatory, the inevitable conclusion is that there is a fundamental discrepancy in processing modes. It is not cowardice, it is analysis. And my current analysis indicates that I have tried to apply logical principles to a fundamentally irrational environment. It is a miscalculation, not a moral failing. Final update. It has been 4 months. The apartment, once a bustling operations center for a perfect life, is now just a space. The silence has become permanent. Solitude is now the default operating state. I have tried to reactivate the maintenance protocol a couple of times by going out with my old friends, but the dynamic has changed. There is a silent judgment in their eyes, an unbridgeable distance. The act of betrayal, which for me was a meaningless transaction, has lost its purpose. There is no thrill in breaking the rules when there is no longer a perfect structure to challenge. It is like cheating at a game no one else is playing. It is a futile exercise. I have sold the apartment. Too much data linked to a failed project. I'm in the process of moving to a smaller, more efficient place just for me. A new beginning, a system redesigned from scratch with no external dependencies. Last week, as I was sorting through the final paperwork, I received one last email. The sender was Javier. For a moment, my system registered a peak of interest. Perhaps after months, logic had finally prevailed. Perhaps he was ready to discuss the terms of a possible reintegration. But the email contained no text, not from him at least. There was only a link and a single sentence below it, a terse signature, but devastatingly precise in its intent. The sentence was, "I hope this helps you understand." I clicked the link. It took me to an article, a detailed clinical article from a psychology journal. The title was Understanding Narcissistic Personality Disorder Logic as a Defense Mechanism and the Inability for Empathy. I read every word. I read the descriptions of grandiosity, of the need for admiration, of the view of relationships as transactional tools. I read about the inability to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. I read about the tendency to react to criticism with anger or humiliation and to blame others for one's own mistakes. Every sentence, every symptom, every case study was a data point. A data point that fit a pattern I had refused to see until that moment. It was the only piece of information that has managed to penetrate my defenses. Not because it was emotional, but because it was ironically purely logical. It was a diagnosis. I did not feel a collapse like Javier's. There was no system failure. It was more like a programmer finding a fundamental bug in their own source code. A bug that explains all the glitches, all the unexpected results, all the incompatibility with other systems. Javier did not send me an emotional accusation, he sent me a technical manual of my own flaws. It was the most intelligent and cruel move he could have made. He did not attack me, he simply defined me. So here I'm alone in a half-empty apartment with a truth I cannot rationalize or dismiss. Javier was not a failed project. The world is not illogical. The flaw, the design error, has always been me. And that is a conclusion that no data analysis can solve. I'm ready to start over, but for the first time I do not know what the parameters of the new project are. The architect is looking at the blueprints and realizes she does not know how to build. The unbreakable rationalizer has finally run out of justifications. The system at last has come to a complete stop. Comment on the final update. Anonymous User 1. Wow, that email from Javier is one of the most brutally perfect things I have ever read. He did not use insults or drama, just the naked truth presented as what you value so much. Data. Sometimes recognition is the first step. Maybe this is yours, not to get him back, but to start building a Valentina 3.0 that does not need spreadsheets to understand love. OP's response. The term Valentina 3.0 implies there is a clear upgrade path. I'm not sure it is that simple. The article was not a repair guide, it was a description of a fundamentally different operating system. Recognizing it is one thing, rewriting it is another. I appreciate the concept, but right now I only see the faulty code. Anonymous User 2. I'm glad Javier found a way to communicate his pain in a way you could understand. And I'm glad for you, not because you deserve it, but because no one deserves to live in a logical prison like yours. This hurts for sure, but it is the kind of pain that cleanses. The first real feeling you have perhaps described in this whole story. Do not waste it. OP's response. I would not call it a feeling, it is the acceptance of a diagnosis. Pain is an inefficient variable. What I feel is a void. The void left when the framework with which you have interpreted your entire reality crumbles. I do not know if you can build something on a void. Anonymous User 3. I'm not going to say I told you so. Well, yes, I did tell you so, but what matters is what you do now. You can take that diagnosis and use it as another excuse as shield to say, I cannot help it, this is how I'm. Or you can do the fucking hard work of dismantling yourself and rebuilding yourself piece by piece. The choice is yours, but at least for the first time it seems you are seeing the real game, not the simulation you had created in your head. OP's response. You are right. There is a danger that this diagnosis becomes the ultimate rationalization, the final justification for all past and future failures. I'm aware of that possibility. As for dismantling and rebuilding, that is a very long-term project.